Welcome to My Life. I'm John Ochins, and we're back here with longtime Oxford resident Jim Parkhurst, who's done many, many things in our community, most of which have to do with veterans and veterans organizations. We're tickled to have you with us, Jim.
Glad to be here.
Just as a reminder, Jim is a past commander of the American Legion. He's currently on the executive committee, and he's the curator of their wonderful museum over there. He's been involved in just about every veterans project around town that you can imagine, including the one down in Lake Orion, the Veterans Memorial down there. Absolutely. He's a lifetime member of the VFW, the AMVETS, the Sons of the American Legion. And if you trace Jim's family back, he's got relatives that were even in the Revolutionary War.
Yes.
So you've been around a while and have some pretty deep roots. Last time we spoke with Jim on our last edition of My Life, we were talking about Jim's experience in South Korea during the Vietnam War, and he was just getting out. You were there for roughly a year, was it, Jim?
18 months.
18 months, almost
extended.
2 years.
I was extended 6 months. I was there 18 months.
And you were extended because of the Pueblo.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Did you, what was going through your mind when the Pueblo thing was going on? Because, I mean, all of a sudden, that was a pretty bright star on the world horizon, the stuff that was going on over there.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of spooky. You got to figure the time frame. I was 20 years old when they took the USS Pueblo. I was a sergeant. I held a position of an acting staff sergeant, and with a field promotion. And, you know, and all this time I was 20 years old, and I'm thinking, wow, what's going to happen? I mean, it was 12:30 at night. They take the USS Pueblo. It's freezing cold out. At the time they took that, it was probably 22 below zero. I'm sitting on top of a 175 self-propelled howitzer, and many of you may wonder what that is. It's got a barrel 28 feet long.
It's a big gun.
It looks like a barrel off a battleship mounted on a track vehicle. It was so cold you had to keep these vehicles started every 20 to 30 minutes, start them, because if you didn't, the hydraulic oil would get stiff like tar and you couldn't fire the thing if you had to. But they took the USS Pueblo, and the fire mission had come down to swing the guns around and point them. And I'm thinking, what's this all about? We're at the fire base set up. So we swing the guns around 90 degrees. Of course, it was too far, so you have to raise these guns and you traverse them around to point in that direction. To get the maximum range out of it, we had to put a couple extra bags of powder in behind and load these guns up to shoot a maximum range. And all this is going on. This is 12:30. It wasn't maybe 25 minutes later, we could hear a whistle coming, and the whistle was kind of a familiar noise. They had F-86s. The United States Air Force had just turned over a squadron of 9 F-86s to the South Korean Air Force. Well, that whistle was that squadron, and they come, and they were right over the top of the ridge where we were at. We were on the side of a mountain. They went right over the top, going the same direction that those barrels are pointing in. And all this time, you're 20 years old, and you're thinking, what's this all about? We had no clue. And they were going that direction, and I don't think it was another 5 minutes later, some F-4 Phantom jets. Now, I don't know if they came off the 7th Fleet or if they were down in the southern end of South Korea. There was an air base down there by Busan, and I think that's where they came from. There was 4 F-4 Phantom jets, and you could hear them screaming, breaking the sound barrier, and when they come over the top of the ridge, I could tell you the snow, I think they were sucking the snow off the top of that ridge. They were going in the same direction. And at daylight, they finally got the orders and told us what had taken place, that the USS Pueblo was taken, the crew was captured, the boat was captured, and I think the mission was that our guns were pointed probably in that direction of that boat, and if we had gotten the order, a presidential order, we may have fired on those boats at that time, on that boat at that time. I don't know if we would have ever hit it because of the range, but it was a spooky time, being 20 years old and in that situation, and I'm thinking, wow, I've only got a few days and I'll be out of here. But that didn't happen. I got extended, as I said, 6 more months.
What was going through your mind as far as what is Jim Parkhurst going to do next in his life when I get out of here?
Well, you know, at the time I wasn't really sure. Like I said, I worked in a machine shop, and I was interested in the modern electronics type things, so a lot of the equipment that you have here. I'm thinking, what can better this country? In 1964, I kind of took the words up of John F. Kennedy, He says, don't ask what you can do. I mean, ask what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you. And I kind of adhered to those words. I thought it was kind of a thing, if I could build computers, maybe that would help this country. So I worked for Control Data 18 and a half years before they moved to Romania, and built computers along with many other people in the area that worked at that company.
Where were they located?
They were located at the corner of Rochester Road and Tinkin. Twist Row was on one corner, and now there's a modern shopping center on that corner. It was Control Data, and like I said, built computers for all these places around the world.
And we have to remember that in those days, a computer very easily could fill a room in some of these big office locations.
Some of them were the size of a big deep freeze. They looked weird, but they printed quite well. And at the time, my thought was, some of those systems that we actually built at that time are used to put our astronauts in space. Control Data had the backup units at the NASA Space Center down in Houston. I think National Cash Register had the system that was used down at NASA in Florida. So those two big companies had systems, and they were used to put astronauts up. And our spaceship Columbia, in fact, those type things to send them up.
I'm trying to remember some of the names of the big companies that were involved with computers back then, besides the ones that, was Burroughs another one?
Burroughs is another one, Telex Corporation, there were several, computer peripherals. There were a lot of Centronics, there were a lot of other companies that were smaller, but those were, I think those were the top big ones out there.
Names you don't hear anymore.
No.
Yeah. So it was at Control Data where you met your wife, is that right?
Yes.
Tell me how that happened.
We worked there for several years. I hired in there in '69, and we'd met, and we're going to parties. The company would have parties, and we met, and was married. We were married in '73. Bought a house. Of course, I live in Bunny Run Sub now. I live less than the old house where I was born is across from the Bunny Run store, and I live on the north side of Bunny Run Lake on Bunny Run Boulevard. So we've lived there for 42 years now. We just had an anniversary a couple days ago.
That must give you a good feeling that when you leave the house every morning, you're stepping on some of the same ground that a lot of your ancestors stepped on way back in your family.
Yeah, it's kind of neat to know that they were here and crossed that land. Probably fished in those lakes within this area and trapped and all those kind of things, and had homes back in that time period. And I'm lucky to be here, being my ancestors, and know what they've done. Yeah.
Now, what about your wife? Is she from around here?
My wife was actually, we met at, like I said, at Control Data. She was from...
And her name is?
Donna.
Donna, okay.
She lived in the Utica area. Went to school over there in that area, and she became a cook. When my son started school, she started working for Lake Orion Schools and put in about almost 25 years in the Lake Orion school system. She was the head cook at Pine Tree Elementary School.
Ah, okay. Well, they're waving at us. We have to take a break again, but don't go away. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Back with Jim Parkhurst. We were just talking about how you met your wife at Control Data, and got married in what year again?
1973.
1973. Moved here to Oxford, back again. Well, you lived in Oxford all your life anyway.
Yeah, well, I live in Orion.
Okay. Where did you go from Control Data? How long did you work for Control Data?
About 18 and a half years. And
that's a long time.
Yeah, and they at that time, they packed up and they moved to a communist bloc country, Romania. It's a matter of business.
What year would that have been?
1985.
Okay.
At that time, and then it was tough finding a job. The economy was slow at the time, so I applied for a job and ended up working for Lake Orion Schools for about a year and a half. I was on maintenance with them, plowed snow, mowed grass, and did those types of things at Lake Orion school system.
So you were working for the same school district as your wife was working for?
Yes. And then at that point, I'd applied for a different type job. I always thought, well, at this time I'd helped, I'd worked for Control Data, built computers, I've worked for the school system, decided, well, I'd like to work outside again. So I went back and I applied for different jobs, Oakland County, the Postal Service, and Orion Township. And I got a call to go to Orion Township, went to work for them for a little over 20 years in Orion Township, and I retired there in January of 2008.
Did you ever wish you would have pursued the computer thing anymore? I mean, hindsight is always 20/20, I know.
Yeah, you know, we build a lot of computers, sent them all over the world. I was a mechanical technician, and they had electronic technicians. I was the mechanical, and I made sure all the parts went in place, and the electronics technician tested everything and made sure that part of it worked, and then it was shipped and crated and went off to various places. But yeah, I would, at the time I probably could have, but I was bought a home, we had married, raised a family, and I didn't really feel I had the time to put in to go to electronics school. And at that time we were working 10 hours a day building equipment going across the world 6 days a week.
Wow.
There weren't a lot of computer companies. It was the early stages in computers, 65, 66 in that time frame. And of course, when I hired in there in 69, computers were just a new type thing. As you said, they were huge, but they did the job.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a learning experience just to be able to work on those, to put them together.
At what point in all this did you become a part of the veterans organizations around here?
My dad, back in 1967, I was still in Korea, signed me up in the VFW. My dad was one of the officers with the VFW in the Legion, and signed me up in the VFW in 1967. In fact, I still have my original card in my wallet. It's continuous since '67. Then later I became a member of the American Legion, and when the AMVETS post was founded, they named the post after my father and George Barnes and Donnie Adams, the three gentlemen there. The post was named after them, and I became the first life member signed up for the AMVETS when it started. The Sons, I've worked on various programs over the years with them, and that's became a life member of the Sons.
Did you find that after you got back here after the service and got involved in these things, that your dad talked to you a little more easily about his own experiences during World War II?
Yeah, you know, most of these guys I've found being associated with the museum, and people that come in, the vets look at the showcases. I've had guys that walk in and look at those showcases and don't really say anything, and you'll find that with a lot of the vets out there. They've had stories and they've held those within for 50 to 70 years. Have never spoken or said anything, but eventually they'll come around a little, and I'm easy to talk to, and they'll come back 2 or 3 times, and I can talk to them on a Friday night, and I'll actually make the time to visit with them, sit down and talk to these guys one-on-one, and hear some of the stories. And there's a lot of different stories. I mean, my father I didn't know anything about my father much until we had built the showcases. In January of '99, we'd raised the money, of course, worked on that project, and had the showcases built. And at that point, my dad started to tell me a few things, and some of the other guys were there. We moved this stuff out of the basement, and I'd learned that he had, during the return going back to the Philippines with MacArthur, when they went into Luzon to take back the Philippines in the city of Manila, he was with the 37th Division. In fact, Bill King was with the 40th Division, and Bill King from Oxford, and my dad, and I think there were a couple other guys at that time, were part of those units that went in a four-sided rush to take back the city of Manila. And in the process, part of the 1st Cav was there, took one of the, I think it was Jibwa prison that held 500 prisoners at the time, kind of northeast of the city of Manila. Some of those guys, my dad from the 37th, they jumped in the back of a bunch of trucks. And I believe there were like 600 men that got in trucks. They all had automatic weapons, most of them.
Now let's refresh everybody's memory here. The Japanese were in control of this at the time.
Yeah, if you back up, the Japanese took Corregidor, the fall of Corregidor. A lot of those men and the Filipinos at the time were put in prison camps around this city of Manila itself. There were 3 prison camps. The first one we mentioned, the 1st Cav went in and took that. A lot of the guys jumped back into the trucks, had no idea what they were about to get into. There were several trucks, 600 men. They were stacked in the back of trucks with automatic weapons, and they made a mad rush to get to Manila. The idea was to get there to save as many Filipino people, nationals, as they could, before the Japanese would kill them or shoot them, and to rescue what they could out of prisons. Well, they made it to Manila. The rest of the forces finally caught up. The 37th Division of Manila's got to the city of Manila, and then at that time they loaded up some more. My dad, they volunteered, got back in the trucks, drove past around Manila, got through it. The 11th Airborne, part of those guys were in there. They got to a big lake. There was some amphibious vehicles and whatever they could get in, and some Marines, and they went across the lake at night. And the next morning, they got on the other side of this lake before it was even daylight, met the Filipino guerrilla fighters, and their mission was to rescue another bunch of people that were in Billy Bid prison. And at that time, the Filipinos were to hold the bridge and hold a certain sector. There was another force of around, I guess, 2,000 Japanese that were within a couple miles of that prison. Their job was to blow that bridge and hold those Japanese so the Americans could rescue those that were in that prison. And there's been a movie made of it. It's not as accurate as it should be.
Yeah, I know we were both racking our brains trying to think of the name of it before we sat down for this conversation.
I couldn't think of it either at that point. And in fact, there's been specials on the History Channel about this also. Yeah, but at any point, they rescued those people that were in the prisons. They expected there was much more. They thought there would be closer to 3,500. There was Filipinos and Australians. Of course, the guys that were at Corregidor, when it fell, they were all prisoners. Many of them were ill-treated. Many were executed. A lot of them were basically almost starved to death. They were very thin. And the American forces went in and got a lot of them out. And they went down the road with the airborne units. The Filipinos had ox carts, whatever they could get to get these guys transported, because many of them couldn't walk. They had to be carried.
Yeah.
Well, my dad and several of them went back, got on those amphibious vehicles, and back across the lake they go. And they would join their units, and they ended up, the story on the History Channel tells a vivid description of trying to take the big police. There was a big building that the police were in. The Japanese held that almost to the last man, and there was another area, it was Roselle Stadium. And then the main castle was an old castle that was built on the island 1,000 years ago. The artillery kept pounding on the wall. The walls were like 50, 60 feet high and 40 feet thick. And they would keep hammering at those until they could get holes through there to drive a Sherman tank through. My dad was one of the guys that, and the bar gun platoons would follow a tank inside to go inside, and there was roughly, I think, 10,000 Japanese Marines within that wall. And the reason it was held so viciously at the time was because of the gold bullion and the vaults for the islands. All the gold and silver stuff was stored within that.
Yeah, we need to take a break right now, but we'll be back with Jim Parkhurst in just a moment.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website, dogsaver.org, and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link.
Hey Lakeville, you're watching OCTV.
Back with Jim Parkhurst. Jim, I want to go back to your early days with the American Legion. When you came on board back then, obviously you had a ton of guys from World War II who were there.
Yes.
Not so much the case anymore. Did you kind of want to get really involved with the organization right from the get-go, as far as wanting to be a commander, wanting to head committees and that sort, or was that something that kind of grew on you as you went along?
It kind of grew on me. You know, my dad was with the VFW, and he was one of the main officers. At the time, he was a member of the Legion, but he wasn't involved with the Legion as much. Both these organizations work together, basically do a lot of the same things to help community, but my dad was more involved with the VFW, so I used to travel with him and some of the district officers, and it kind of grew on me. Dwayne Sprague was instrumental in talking me into doing more with the Legion, becoming commander there. I'd held several of the officers with the VFW, and at the time it was VFW 4036. And it stayed that way until 1992, when it was basically dissolved in 92. In 95, Bud Rosserman from Lake Orion and a couple of the other officers, Don Tyler and them, approached the Legion Executive Board, and I was on that, of course, and wanted to see if they could come back and get the VFW started again. So that came about. So in 95, the VFW was started up. It was started up as North Oakland VFW 334. Lakeville Leonard had a post at that time. Walt Klaus was one of the commanders from that area, from the Leonard. They used to have meetings over there. Gino Malia Sr. was a member of that VFW over there. And so it was a consolidated effort to bring in those posts that had closed and create 334 and call them the North Oakland VFW, and that's how that came about. And it's still that today, which I'm a life member. So I know several of the guys from them that were part of that, and yeah, you were correct. You can imagine it was founded with a lot of World War II and Korea vets. At that time, in '67, Vietnam was had just basically gotten started. And my dad is, like I said, signed me up in '67, but that's how all this came about.
Must give you kind of a good feeling that you're involved in an organization that he was involved in so heavily back in his day.
Yeah, it is. You know, when I walk into the post, and any of the guys who have been an officer, I started at the bottom. I held several of the offices within the VFW, and I've held all the offices in the American Legion post-wise. I probably could have went on to the 18th district or been a state officer, but my concern was to be a hometown boy. I wanted to make sure that what we do here helps veterans at home. Yeah, it's kind of
things get a little less local by the time you.
Yeah, you don't get the time to spend and the hands-on feeling to sit here and talk to you like this. You
right.
know, you're stretched thin trying to do a lot of things, and I'm aware of what the district officers and state officers do across the state. They've got working on Will Win projects that's up in the UP. We all do the same thing as vets, to help one another and continue the family aspect of it to help veterans and families.
You've been involved with a lot of programs. You've headed a lot of committees for special projects. If you had to pick one that meant the most to you, what would it be?
You know, there are a lot of these projects I've worked on, as you said, but you know, when you take it at heart, I showed you a drawing from a student. He was from Lake Orion Schools. He drew cartoons of various airplanes. His name's Terry. I've had other students, one from Oxford High School, who did a series of cartoon sketches that went in the Free Press about Desert Storm in Iraq. You know, I think one of the best things I've ever done is working where the vets and us down here at the post get to work with school kids. I always remember that, because kids don't have the time or don't take the time, and another aspect of it is that they're not taught a lot about history. Wars and history itself kind of repeat itself, and the more they can learn or take back with them to learn about their own family, they can punch it in on their laptop or their Apple, whatever they happen to have, or their iPhone. They can ask questions like you're asking me. They can sit down and talk to Grandpa at the dinner table, or out back having a barbecue, about Uncle Joe, where did you serve? Because vets don't normally talk, but they'll talk a little about family, and it's important that the veterans we have in our community pass this on to their kids and their grandkids to make them aware of what they did and what it means to be a veteran.
Back a while ago when we first sat down and chatted, you talked to me about your experiences with one of the programs that the American Legion has around Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to just, for the sake of our viewers, would you like to kind of repeat what you said back then about helping people out and the group that's within the veterans that does that?
You know, as veterans, we're not only committed, but we do that from the heart. You know, at Christmas time, we have the Christmas parade in town, and we're passing out candy, of course, but on the other hand, we have a family program that helps at the post. Our kids, our family kids all come, and grandkids come to the post. We have a Christmas for them. But not only that, and many of you aren't aware, and the local post, the VFW helps their national home. The AMVETS, they help local families at Christmas here. The food and the clothes that's given out from the Legion and the Sons of the Legion, we all work together to give back to this community at Christmas time. Whatever it takes. If we've got the money, we buy it. As far as food, clothes, we do whatever we can.
And basically, how do you find out about people in need for these things?
Names come through the Head Start program. We've worked through the school systems. Also, we've worked through the Head Start program, like I said, through there. Christ the King has moved. Of course, the Head Start program that the schools had in Oxford had moved to Christ the King the last couple of years. We worked with them. I want to mention one more thing. We have the American Legion Riders. They started a program. They initiated a program to raise funds when they go on rides, but not only that, they collect old bicycles, or bicycles that can be repaired, or some are new. People move and they donate bicycles. The Legion Riders take these and they make sure families within this area, or in Oxford area, Lakeville, that if you need a bicycle, contact the post. Jim Sargent is the commander of the Legion Riders. They'll do their best to get a bike to you. It's free, doesn't cost you anything.
So all people need to do really is call the post to get things started if they know of somebody
that
in need.
needs a bicycle.
Yeah, okay. You're involved with the Young Marines too.
Yeah, I've been doing the Young Marine program for almost 5 years. In fact, we had a meeting last night. The Young Marines are going to go on a camp out at Bear Lake up in Lions Club, Lapeer area. We've been instrumental. Cease Cameron's the commander of the Young Marines. The officers and myself, I'm the liaison officer and one of the staff officers. I think we have 14 young Marines right now. I think there are 2 young ladies and 12 young men that are in the program. We've had one of the young Marines who went into the Marine Corps. I believe he's still there. Won't mention any names. But yeah, we do that, and when you go through the Young Marines program, if you finish the program up to graduation from high school, you'll end up, if you join the Marine Corps of the United States Navy, you'll basically, when you go in, you'll go to boot camp. They usually make you a squad leader, and they'll give you a stripe, an automatic stripe, which normally takes a new recruit a year to get. So not only you get the stripe, you get a boost in pay automatically. So the Young Marines is a good program. It's a youth program that builds you into an adult, respect for others. Also, the Boy Scouts, the American Legion has sponsored them since 1921. Oxford has sponsored a Boy Scout group. They kind of fell apart a few years ago, and back Rich Morton and some of the guys that were veterans from our post, Rich Morton and Bob Paskey, and those guys, their sons became part of the new Boy Scout program back around 94, 95. I became the liaison officer and got the program going, and then Bob Paskey, his son, of course, is in college now. Bob took up where I left off 5 years ago, and I got into the Young Marines.
Jim's story is unending, and we should all be thankful for that. You've been a valuable member of our community, so I want to say on behalf of everyone here and everyone in Oxford, everyone around, thank you for your service, both here and abroad, and thank you for being on our program.
Well, not only that, I want to thank you guys at OCTV, Bill and the gang here. You work hard. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Jim Parkhurst, thanks for joining us. You're watching OCTV, Oxford Community Television, serving Oxford, Addison Township, and the village of Leonard.